Genesis chapter 19 and verse 1. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. He pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. They called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came in to thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Notice, we're going to see God's mercy even while he's in wrath. And Genesis 19, we'll see that. I want to point out a couple things as we go through this chapter, actually several things. Look at verse 1, and there came two angels to Sodom at even. Notice this is right after that Jesus came to Abraham in chapter 17 and 18, and Jesus and the Bible says men, but there were angels with him. Notice now that Jesus is absent here. And he sent his angels, and angel, whether it's Greek or Hebrew, means messenger. So God often sends his messenger to do what he needs them to do. And here's an example. And notice that Jesus is absent here. It's interesting that Jesus went to Abraham, but now, even though Lot is considered righteous because he's a believer, but he doesn't go to Sodom. And this just goes to support the fact that God, in his righteousness, because he's a holy God, does not live among, fellowship with the unfruitful works of unrighteousness. Jesus was not about to go to Sodom because it's full of wickedness and horrific immorality. And just, the Bible even says the cry of Sodom came up to God. And God heard them. And notice the timing. This is so interesting. There are no accidents with God. And there's no accident why, when the darkness comes, that evil and wickedness prevail, and they are more prevalent. And nightclubs, they're not open at 6 in the morning. They're open until 3 or 4, from what I hear. Isn't that what you were telling me, Brother Dave? No, I'm joking. I'm joking. No, from what I hear, I guess. And they're open at night and to the early hours of the morning. They're not open up, while it's sunlight out and daylight and when normal people are working and interacting. No, they're open at night when people should be resting and sleeping. And so these two angels came at even. There is no accident why he's coming to Sodom and Gomorrah at night. I'll venture to say that if we think of wicked cities in our country that are known for wickedness, Las Vegas is number one. I would venture to say that Las Vegas has a lot more wickedness going on at night than 8 o'clock in the morning. And my wife and I, on our 5th anniversary, went to New Orleans, and it was just like a 3-day, 2-night thing there. We stayed in the French Quarters, and some of the locals said, listen, you want to get back to the hotel before 7. Definitely before sundown, but definitely before 7. And the French Quarters is a historic area, so we did. We were back usually by 6. And we were up early, and we went around. And it was so funny, interesting. You have these city workers hosing down the streets and cleaning them off from the night before and all the wickedness that went on there. And there were some streets we didn't even need to go down. It was just, we don't even go over there. And in the morning it's one thing, at night it's another. And these angels are going to come because they're going to prove a point with their actions. This is what I'm getting at here. All right, they're going to prove a point with their actions. And let's continue on verse 1. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. So he's doing this this respectful greeting, and he's being courteous. And verse 2, and he said, behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house and tarry all night. You know, it's so funny. Lot didn't really feel like going to bed until he saw them. Why is he hanging out at night and waiting for them? And now he's urging them, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house and tarry all night. Wash your feet, and you shall rise up early and go on your ways. You know what he's basically saying? Don't even stay here. You're not going to be here long, I promise you. And we see the implication of some haste here in verse 2. And they said, nay, but we will abide in the street all night. Of course, these are angels. One angel killed 70,000 men in one occurrence. The angels are not worried about human, violence upon them. But the angels, and I think I believe when they came to Sodom, we see their action. It's almost like, no, Lot, we're going to see the city you chose. Lot, we're going to see the lifestyle that you've been living in. Lot, we're going to see how you're still sitting out and noticing who's coming along their way. We're going to see what you see. And I've had some interactions with my dad when I was growing up. And I remember there were some times when I got caught doing some things I shouldn't have been doing. And my dad's like, no, we're going to take our time and we're going to see exactly what you've been doing, son. Oh, the old boy just killed me. Now my life is coming to an end. And I think that's the same implication here. No, Lot, we want to see what you saw, what you're living in. And notice this here, that God, being a wonderful God and a merciful God, he's going to come down or send his messengers down to see it firsthand, because he is a righteous God. Verse 3, and he pressed upon them greatly. This is Lot pressing upon the angels greatly. And they turned in unto him and entered into his house. And he made them a feast and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So he basically made them go in. He couldn't have made them gone in if they didn't want to go in, but they went in. And I think their actions were really making this statement. And so he's making a big feast. All right, ladies, can you whip up a big feast like that? No. Usually takes some time, doesn't it? And don't spring it upon you, because if it's sprung upon you, then it's going to be bad news for the husband that asked you to do that. So it's taken us a while here. And so after a while, of course, he made them a feast and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So now they're eating. Verse 4, but before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. Now, we believe the Bible at its words. We take the Bible literally. So all the people from Sodom, from all the quarters, from every section of the town, both old and young, the men, circled around the house of Lot. Now, I don't know about you, but if all of the men of Athens came and circled around my house, I'd be making sure my guns were oiled and they were armed and ready, locked and loaded. How many know what I'm talking about? Because business is about to pick up. Well, here, Lot, I'm sure he's seeing and hearing what's going on out there. And notice in verse 5, and they called unto Lot and said unto him, where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them. He knew what was going to happen. He knew what they were going to do because he lived among them. Now I'm going to say this right here. You get to know people when you live with them. You see their warts. You smell their body odor. You see with their good points and you see their bad points. And Lot is living among them. And notice that they said that we may know them, not who they were, not from whence they came, not what their business was, which were common questions of people who came into a city that were a stranger, nor did they pretend any of this kind to hide and cover their design from Lot. But they were open and impudent and declared their sin without shame and blushing, which was the character of this city. Notice again, the cry of Sodom in chapter 18 and chapter 17 went up to God and he heard the cry because things like this happened. The men of the city came and they wanted to know him immorally. And they were not ashamed of it. They were what we would call loud and proud. There used to be in a day in America where those sodomites used to stay in the closet. Now they're not. I'm not trying to say anything hateful, but now they shove their sin in your face, and if you don't rubber stamp their sin, then you're labeled a hater, racist, because you believe differently. They want to have freedom of speech for them, but you can't even have freedom of thought for you. That's what sin does. It controls what you do. Now, we see their character. Isaiah chapter 3, verse 9. I'll read it for you. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. This is the town that Lot chose when he chose the well-watered plains instead of Abraham. Let's move on to verse 6. And Lot went out at the door and shut the door after him. And so he's probably going out of his door and saying, all right, guys, shh, 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 shh. Notice what he says, verse 7. I pray you, what's that next word? He's calling them brothers. Let me ask you a question, ladies. Would you have a problem if your husband called a big group of homosexuals, hey, brethren? There'd be a problem. Would you have a problem if your pastor did the same thing? Absolutely. There is a problem here. And this is the problem with Lot, because he was sitting in the gate as a city leader. He now, hey, brethren. Now he says something else to him. Do not so wickedly. Yeah, right. That's like telling a hungry dog not to eat. That's like telling a dog at night not to bark. Amen? Because you know dogs love to bark at night. Usually just when you fell asleep. Verse 8. Behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Here we have one of the most wicked, vile decisions a saved man is going to make in trying to not only save face, so to speak, or not be embarrassed, but also he's going to put his own daughter's health and purity in jeopardy. Let me say this right here, and I don't want to get too fixated on this. You can choose your sin, but you don't choose the consequences. Sin will take you farther than you ever wanted to go. It'll take you deeper than you ever thought imagined. And it'll destroy your life before you even realize it. Can you imagine dads throwing your children to this horrible, wicked crowd just to pacify them? Of course, they didn't accept that. They said, stand back. And the angels interceded and pulled Lot back into the house and smote the men at the door with blindness, and those men wearied themselves. Look at verse 10. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, so both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. And the men said unto Lot, hast thou here any besides son-in-law and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. Do you think those angels knew how many children Lot had? Absolutely. Now, I don't know of a place in the Bible, maybe it's there and I just don't know it, where it shows Lot had sons. Obviously, he talks about daughters-in-law because there are some daughters that married some men of the city. And then there were 2 virgin daughters that he had in his home still. But I think it's interesting why the angels would say to him, go to your sons. And it doesn't show him going to his sons, did it? Does it? Look at verse 14. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. Why would the sons-in-law give any shred of credibility spiritually to Lot? He's their brethren. And this is one of the dangers of when, I got to say this carefully because there's a lot of differing opinions out there among churches and preachers and Christians. You know, we should reach the lost, but we should not become them to reach them. We see what happens. When you become, quote unquote, when you become them to reach them, you become them and don't reach them. They reach you and you never reach them. The sons-in-law laughed like they thought he was mocking or making a joke, or probably said it sarcastically. Yeah, I know. That's a shame, because the angels went there to Sodom to take Lot and his family out. In the previous chapter, Abraham had this big conversation with God. Will you destroy the city if you find 50 righteous people? God said no. And Abraham had this negotiation with the Lord, and Abraham got God from 50 down to what? 10. Shows God's willing to negotiate a little bit in certain circumstances. And they couldn't even find 10. So let's move on. Verse 15, and when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. Verses 15 and 16, the Lord really kind of made jump out at me here. When the morning arose. When did the angels come to Lot? It was at night, right? Lot made this big old meal. They ate. It was probably, if we use modern day time frame, probably 2, 3 in the morning where they finally were done. And when the morning arose, there's a few hours that have gone by here, most likely. Notice the mercy of God and the patience of God as God still gave him time to get out of Sodom. Notice right after they were done eating and the angel smote those men with blindness, they didn't leave right then. He gave Lot time to go talk to his daughters and son-in-law. And they said no, and they mocked. And the angels still tarried. They tarried until the morning. And it shows God's patience, even in the time of wrath. Verse 16, and while he lingered, who's that word he? Who's that referring to? So think about this. Let me paint the picture. You have somewhere early hours of the morning before the sun came up, Lot has this time to go get his family out of the city. The sons-in-law and the daughters aren't coming. If they have children, they're not coming either. The Bible doesn't say anything about grandchildren there. It just says daughters and son-in-laws. And even still, after he couldn't get his son-in-laws to come, there was still a delay of time. I still think God was giving them a space to maybe a repentance a little bit, maybe a space of changing their mind, of coming back so they're not eaten up with the destroyed of the city. And now when the time comes, when the angel said, okay, now's the time. Look at the wording here in verse 16. Verse 15. And when the morning arose, then. That points out a time appointed. Then the angels hastened. When the morning arose, then the angels hastened. Lot saying, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. So now, all that Lot has left now is Lot, his wife, his 2 daughters. There are 4 considered righteous people in the city. Those are the 4 that God is rescuing out of Sodom before he destroys it, okay? Because we know that God won't destroy the righteous with the wicked. And we all say, thank God for that. Amen. But 16, while he lingered? Some people think, it's because he had children there. Some people think, maybe there were grandchildren. Maybe it's because he had lifelong friendships that he created there or that developed there. But notice that Lot still was not willing to leave the city that he knew God was going to destroy. Isn't that interesting? while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand. Verse 15, they tell Lot, take your wife and daughters and get out of here before the fire and brimstone come down. And he still didn't do it. They had to go and put their hand, grab his hand, and they had to drag him out. This is a Christian man. This is one of God's people. Hey, Lot, what happened? He didn't want to go. See, this is what happens when sin gets a hold of your life. You get so used to it. You get so addicted to it. You get so used to a certain life. And I'm not talking about just the easy, drugs or alcohol or smoking or immorality. Of course, all that applies. But what about rebellion? There's rebellion going on right here. There's rebellion and stubbornness happening in the life of Lot. And this is such a synonymous thing that when someone is living in sin, you can't tell me otherwise. I believe that's one of the reasons why the angels why they chose to come down at night. Because they had to embarrass him to get him to realize and recognize that what he's doing is wrong. And God had to do it. And then they just laid hold on his hand and they drug him out of the city. What a horrible testimony. All because he wanted it easier. He wanted to have a more comfortable lifestyle. He wanted to have it easier than Uncle Abraham. He wanted to have a more convenient and more comfort. And it looks nicer. It's a prettier city than out here. We see that you can choose your sin, but you cannot choose the consequence. Verse 16. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand and upon the hand of his wife, upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. I thank God for his mercy in my stubbornness. On my prayer cards in my house, next to my devotion Bible, one of the sins I asked the Lord to forgive me of is my stubbornness and my stiff neck. I don't always have it, but there are times. And I'm going to tell you, our stubbornness and our stiff neck will cause us more problems than what we realize. And I know it. And at the bottom of my confession of sin, I have a prayer, Lord, rescue me from my sin and my self-destruction. Before I get too high and mighty and think I'm so special, more than Lot, I need to realize I'm no better than Lot. I don't think any of us are any better than Lot. I think if we all used some humility and some honesty, I think we'd all, if we were in that situation, might act the same way. I hope I wouldn't, but I'm so glad that every morning the Lord's mercies are new. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not destroyed. And I'm paraphrasing because I'm botching it up in my mind. And at the end of that verse, it says, great is thy faithfulness. The Lord has more mercy than I have sin. Thank God for his mercy. I'll tell you, it's only by his mercy that we're still here. It's only by his mercy. What, 60, 70 some million babies murdered? That's just abortion. Murdered. We can't talk about Hitler and demonizing him when America has done multiplied tens of millions more. It's God's mercy. Thank God for his mercy.